It will be available for you afterwards. I will provide it in the link along with the presentation. So you can see here the bit.ly link is the M365 Adoption December 21. And that will actually go in for you to be able to review should you not be able to stay for the whole session. Okay. So I will put the recording link inside the presentation. I will also for you, I've been looking at YouTube and putting a lot of the past history and information up onto YouTube. So I'll provide that. We'll have it, hopefully for you for the new year to make it a little easier to access the information along the way. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we actually meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples here today. Our code of conduct, same as we do at the beginning of everything. We all hopefully be warm and welcoming, and we be understanding of others' viewpoints, differences, and we be friendly. Try to use, if you wish to, use some images and GIFs along the way, that they are actually appropriate and that they're friendly too. We have the use as well of course, the reactions. If you have a question at any point, you can raise your hand or you can type it into chat for me. My name is Kirsty McGrath. If you haven't been into the session before, I am an adoption consultant and trainer, and I have a company called On Point Solutions. So I run the user groups for Australia, and I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm going all Christmas theme. So you're liking the red, I'm going the Christmas theme for you. So what have I been doing leading up to Christmas? Doing lots of things like macarons and biscuits and all sorts of fun things, pavlovas, and getting stuck into the Christmas theme and getting all my gifts and everything ready for others and making cakes. And this is what I do in my spare time. You've probably seen it in the past, but there's always something new happening. So what's happening? What's new in the Microsoft 365 space? Certainly not as much as what we've had in the past. So it's pulled back a little bit on, I suppose, with coming into the new year, sort of slowing down a bit. There was a lot of announcements, of course, around Ignite. I have kept that information in there for you around Ignite in the presentation. So getting started, you will actually note now the real-time translation, the Communication Access real-time translation art in the captioning in meetings. You now don't have to have it in a second window. So that's actually available now sitting directly inside Teams in terms of what's new that's come out. The content from your camera, so the intelligent capture allows you to be able to share that physical whiteboard. Now, people are made transparent. You will have seen this in the past, sort of doing the capturing. We've seen this sort of capturing information there for a while now, flowing through from Office Lens, if you've ever used Lens from your mobile phone in the past. So some of that sort of, we're starting to see it flowing through into Teams, which is which are awesome to be able to see for meetings. We've talked a bit about this. The cloud poll is now here. We're talking about it was coming. It is now out. It was in the September user group. So if you want to look into a little bit more, feel free to. You can always go back to some of our past information. So what's coming now in the meetings and webinar space? So that whole mirror my video so that you no longer have to see all the text flip. So for me in the background, when I look at the picture, all the text is actually flipped in the background, which I often see people try and correct it because they think that they're looking at it, then it becomes flipped for the other party rather than you. So you'll start to see this now flowing through into various areas, and you can turn it on and off. If you've, very used to it, you might want to turn it off. So it is in the device settings. You can pin your own video in the Teams meetings now. So that's coming out very soon, early Jan to Feb, to be able to, pin yourself. That means that, some of those features that come into play is that there's no more overlaying of that video box and other participants' videos, which could get a little frustrating. You'll be able to see your own video on a bigger scale and adjust it, better view of yourself, especially if you're dealing with diversity, for example, around sign language. So these become really important to be able to give you a bit of a balanced view with others. Music mode for Teams. So we've now got the high fidelity music flowing through. So you'd have to go into your team setting under devices to be able to turn this on. Particularly great for those that might be doing music lessons, for example, if you're dealing with your children and they're doing it virtually. So, a great feature that's actually flowing through. Oh, by the way, you'll also see down the bottom left-hand corner here, it will actually come up in Teams. You'll see the little high fidelity mode down at the bottom there. Okay. So in terms of Teams calling, I'm only focused on some of the, I suppose, more end-usery type stuff. There's always plenty that's going on, including lots of new devices, for example. If you want to see a lot of this, I highly recommend going to the more technical, UC user group, where the guys there do a fabulous job, whether it's here in Sydney or the one in Melbourne, to be able to support you around what's going on in sort of more depth. But there's now custom music in terms of going on hold. It can be organised by administrators. Routing calls to the unassigned users. We found that for a lot of users, they found it very difficult to be able to have it where it went to a call queue or announcement or something like that. So these can now be set up in terms of resourcing, and a custom call park, because in the past it only sort of had a maximum hold time when it came to ringing back. So that can now be adjusted. So you can have a larger number of park calls as well with that broader range. In terms of what's new in chat and collaboration, so the loop components, we've talked a bit about the loop and what's actually coming. So the first part of that vision is actually rolling out now into Teams chat to be able to allow you to be able to edit those messages in line, allowing, and look, there's other I suppose, items that you're going to be able to see coming in, the table and action items and lists and a few other things in line inside loop. Okay. So those first vision pieces are starting to flow in, which is great. Top Hits provides a new search result section. So when you actually type in, you've now got this top hits flowing through, and there's also a redefined search results page coming in Teams to be able to sort through. So you can look at either all messages, people's files, and you've got the filtering that comes in under that redefined search page. So if you've got content like training content, for example, there are components that you're going to need to update to support that and flowing through. There has been a visual update in Office. I have been playing around with it now for a while in my office on my particular laptop. I've got one with it not in there. You'll see the colors have actually swapped out, so they're a little bit more generic. The main things are going to be, and I've put here down the bottom so that you can see it's around the design refresh. It's going in flow of the fluid. So it's kind of in the fluid mode in terms of its design, by the way, if you want to have a look at what's happened and why it's happened. But the one thing I'll warn is that the quick access toolbar, which you're very used to in terms of running along the top, it's actually hidden by default now. And when you do turn it on, by default, it goes below the ribbon. So if you want to, you can adjust it so it goes back above the ribbon again, but it has actually moved. So if people are wondering where it is, that's what's happened. Okay. There in Outlook. Okay, so there was new suggested replies. You may have seen this flowing through. It's actually hit now. So there's some short email responsing that's flowing in to be able to support you. So what it does is it has a look at, what they've stated. So down the bottom, if it thinks it could be a really quick reply, it'll actually give you suggestions around quick replies for you, so you can just tap on it. Okay. You can actually, even though you've tapped on it, it won't automatically send. You can actually edit and adjust it before you press send. So it's not like it'll flick it out automatically on you. There is improved search in terms of address that now including name, title, location, and a little bit more there. In terms of SharePoint, highly recommend going into the Internet Zone roadmap pit stop that's actually provided by, Mark Cashman and the team to be able to help and support you. The main things that I'm going to focus on are there's conversation search now flowing through in terms of Office.com and SharePoint. Private drafts, so you'll see over on the right-hand side, so in the SharePoint pages, so you can have kind of a drafts mode. And then Spaces now have new embed web parts. So you can put in things like Microsoft Forms, which is what I'm particularly loving. So you can actually see Forms as a web part inside SharePoint. So there's some of the components that you'll see. I just ask that if there's anyone there, maybe they could go on mute. We're just getting a little bit of feedback flowing through. Thanks. Okay, we've got, in terms of updates around site creation experience. Now what's happening is you get this creation wizard to be able to help and support you to understand, well, what is a team site? What's a communication site? It's just a little sort of simple interface change, but I think it's going to make a difference around, which one people are selecting to get started from. Some of the other features of what's coming to SharePoint. So the improvements around SharePoint page authoring. So we've got adding labels to be able to reduce some of that clutter around actions. There's going to be a single web part toolbar that helps the authors be able to put it into a bit more focus mode by default. So it helps to remove some of the visual distractions. So you'll see over on the right-hand side, I've put one of the main features that are actually coming around that toolbar, your section labels to be able to support you. So they're going to be hitting supposedly around about early December. So you've got your targeted release through to, into your sort of standard around February. So it will take a little while. It might not hit you till closer to the end of Feb, that one. You have modern lookup columns flowing in to be able to connect lists to from other sites, for example, to be able to look up. So you can include it in your own list as part of a bit of a modern lookup, which I am loving, because sometimes we've got lists elsewhere and we can have it flow through. So that's coming in around, it was starting late November, it should finish hopefully soon, to be able to see that in there. Now, it's important to understand that when you've got your usage reports, especially when we're thinking about, adoption and we want to understand what's going on, you're not going to be able to actually access the popularity and search reports anymore under those classic site collections. It's now moved over into another area under insights. So just take that into consideration. Now they're also 31 days, so they're up from 14 days, which is great. So we've got a little bit longer to be able to have a look at that content around the reporting. There is the new feedback portal. We've seen it and I've included it for Teams and some of the others. We've now got the feedback portal. So this is if you used to use the user voice. So they're moving over to the new feedback portal. So for OneDrive and SharePoint. So they're the links to be able to support with really good interactive checkboxes around filtering. In terms of OneDrive, the sharing experience is adjusting. So over time, you're going to see a few different changes flowing through, and they're doing it in staged increments, by the way. So the sharing experience now around copy link has adjusted a little. So you're going to see now a whole entire section instead of just a little copy link button that used to be down the bottom, to be able to share with recipients. This way you can update those permissions around that copy link there. So that's not far off, and you should hopefully see that coming through. What's new in OneDrive? There is a new drop-down menu, so you're going to see it underneath Documents to be able to switch through multiple document libraries should you have them. Okay, so you can select that now in your OneDrive environment to be able to work with it. It's coming early Jan. In terms of lists, the app for lists has been out for a little bit now. If you might have seen it if you've downloaded it to your mobile phone. I suppose the main thing to understand here, in terms of taking it offline and making it faster, is actually being turned into what we call a PWA, a progressive web app. So this then allows it to be able to, I suppose, be a little bit disconnected but connected in terms of SharePoint and how it actually works. So I highly recommend going and have a look. So you'll be able to see then what's going on to be able to support you around offline access. So that SharePoint, I suppose, lists is slowly getting a bit of an upgrade, and it's moving through. The great part about this is it's all the things off the back of lists that we're seeing that makes it really smart, because it's got all the automation, for example, and all these other components that are coming in as it gets turned into a web app. All right. What's new in Viva? Okay, so all 4 modules now are actually generally available, which is great, and you can purchase it under one plan. The main one that's just come out is Viva Connections, so you'll be able to then get your tenant prepared and turned on. You will need to enable it, so you can go actually into Microsoft Teams, and inside Teams under your apps, you'll have to go in there, and if you just type in Viva Connections, if you're administration, you'll be able to just push the toggle to make it available for the organisation. Now, there are other things that you need to do kind of in the background to make it free. Ross, you have your hand up. Can't hear you yet.
Sorry, yeah, new headset. I was just going to make sure that it was clear that there are seeded features in the different modules, so that you talk about it all being available under one price. That's like the premium bit.
That's the premium
without
version,
paying,
absolutely.
yeah, even without paying anything, there's Viva pieces that people, we would say, can and should be using.
Yeah, that's it. There's sort of the free to organization, I suppose, components that are available. And then when it comes to things like insights, there's only so much on the insights. If you want to get sort of the full management insights, for example, you're going to need to deep dive and get some of the premium solutions there as well. So there are some components that are quite extensive, but it'll only go so far in terms of, especially around when you look at some of the Viva Learning and some of the connections that you can provide there around Viva Learning. So there becomes components around it. So one to dive into. As we stated before, Viva is a whole another, I think, topic and user group potentially. All right. The insights, so praise history, you can now get in terms of the praise history, you'll be able to see and view anything that's been sent and received over the last 6 months as part of that app. That'll start in early January to be able to flow through so that you can see the insights on the praise dashboard. Okay. Working on the go with mobiles. If you're an Android user, you'll be rather excited that it's finally hit us. You can do the change the background in your Teams meeting. Okay. In terms of events and workshops that are coming up, actually it's over the next 2 days. What's kind of for the APAC region, it hits us on the 9th, but it's starting and sort of running for, I can't remember how many hours now, but you'll be able to join that coming up very soon. It's kicking off from tomorrow, well, actually the late hours of the following morning overseas. So go and register and join. There's going to be some really great stuff that's actually provided. And I will also, if there's a recording or link, I'll make sure that it's in there for when we all get back. Okay. And now I'd like to introduce the guest speaker, and I am really excited to have Rishi come back. He presented for us last year around the MOCA framework. He's the behavior and modern work architect at Microsoft, sort of looking at, I suppose, some of the psychology behind what we do. So I will let him do a bit more around the introduction of who he is and what he's doing, and I will put his presentation link in very soon, and I'll let you take over now. Rishi, thanks for joining us. Don't forget, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I can always interrupt Rishi along the way, or you can raise your hand and we'll flow over. I'll let you take over, Rishi.
Right, great. Thank you very much, Kirsty. And it's good to see so many people join the session today. So many of you would have heard me talk about the modern collaboration architecture previously. We have just released a new update during Ignite a few weeks ago. So Kirsty thought that it'd be worthwhile me giving everybody an update. We also have Ross on the call. So Ross is the co-author of MOCA, and so it's really good to have him. And so once again, Ross and I are here to sort of help answer any questions that you may have. So just a little bit about me. I'm part of the Fast Track team, and my background is organizational psychology and behavioral sciences. So especially when we talk about adoption, right, we know it's all about people and how people end up wanting to use the tools so they can drive the business impact. And so from that perspective, it's always handy to have a people-centric approach to how technology can be used. And I guess that's really my role in Microsoft, is to help organizations look at how they use technology to help people become even more effective. So I've got a background in organizational psychology. I'm currently pursuing a change management MBA from UNSW. And I'm also a ProSci certified advanced instructor. So for people who are familiar with ProSci's change management ADKAR methodology, that's something that I've been using with customers for a little while. So before I jump into talking about MOCA, I thought, given that this is an M365 adoption user group, that I pose all of you this question. And I guess I'm looking at it from a M365 perspective, right? Or we can just look at the concept of adoption in general. From your perspective, and feel free to come off mute and contribute, what is adoption?
I think successful adoption is where staff, really embed the use of the technology for, their own benefit in terms of, work efficiency and enjoyment and so on, but also for organisational benefit, whatever that organisation's mission is.
Yeah, 100%, Andrew. I think that's a very nicely rounded definition of adoption. Does anybody else want to jump in? I see Melinda's done a post saying integrating behaviors into your everyday, which is pretty good. Anybody else? Well, Kirsty, I'm actually going to push this open to you, right? As the one who organizes these user groups and spends your day talking with customers around adoption. What do you think adoption is? You're still on mute.
I need to come off mute. That was it. I was just trying to find. It's like, hang on, it's collapsed the screen down on me because I clicked on this and then I clicked on that. I was like, look, adoption is about habitual usage in terms of the change of behavior to ensure that, and for me, that whole, user not left behind is very much my philosophy, and that to have that user not left behind to me is literally that sustainable adoption that they've got. Not only do they know how to, they want to, and they can do. It's kind of all three components is often what I kind of drive into and continue to do.
See, that's perfect. So I guess I wanted to cover this because this is important. Very often I find that a lot of organizations are still looking at adoption from a technical perspective instead of that human perspective. And so typically I've worked with customers around the world on adoption programs. And typically these are the 4 stages we see organizations go through. And so the first one, deployment, right? That's a no-brainer. And as IT organizations, right, we're excellent at it. So it's about making sure that the technology is available to people who need the technology available. And so technology is great. What we don't want to do is to limit the adoption program to just having a technical focus, right? And that's what is one of the areas where a lot of organizations trip over, is that they treat the change as they would treat an IT change, instead of treating this as a human behavior change, right? Or around what Kirsty said, is about making sure those new behaviors are embedded. The next phase is what we call as usage. Now, usage is typically what we see when people end up using the products, but the usage signifies that the use is ad hoc. So one day I may talk to Ross on IM, next day I may talk to Ross via email, and the third day I might give Ross a call, right? And the fourth day, because he's in the office that day, I might rock up and see him at his desk. Now, there's nothing wrong with having multiple ways of engaging and communicating. And the challenge is when the other person doesn't know which way you're going to engage with them. And so they're anticipating, or they don't know what to anticipate. And that anticipation creates anxiety, right? And that's just how our brain works. If we don't understand something, it creates our amygdala to be engaged. And as a result, that starts to create stress. And so, especially as we think about a hybrid workplace, what we want to do is to avoid usage-centric behaviors that are propagated as part of adoption programs. Organizations also find themselves in usage if they have focused purely on comms and training. Comms and training, and please don't get me wrong, are very important aspects of an adoption program, but they are not sufficient by themselves. So as you're thinking about what hybrid workplace looks like for your organizations and the role of M365, in your adoption approach, definitely have adoption training and comms there, but also leave a space for other things that need to be done. Now, the challenge with usage is that it is a necessary evil. Organizations need to go from deployment through usage into adoption. Good adoption programs will minimize the amount of time that people spend in pure usage of a product before they start getting into adoption. And so to help organizations think about adoption in a common way, right, we've just created a definition. And Kirsty, you actually did pretty good, right? So Microsoft defined adoption as deep habitual use that delivers tangible value to the end user, the line of business, or the organization. Right. So Andrew, to your point, the value has to be to both the user as well as from an organizational perspective. And so that deep habitual usage, right, that and the creation of that value together are really critical in us looking at adoption behaviors. And so for a good adoption program, typically you would see that the focus is on business value. It's about solving business challenges. And Kirsty and I were having an email exchange earlier today, where Kirsty was talking about, well, Rishi, what's the latest Microsoft advice on personas and scenarios? And really, the advice that I usually give is that personas are around how you want people to work. And every organization, based on their culture, will have a different set of expectations for how their people work. So when you're thinking about creating personas, make sure they're appropriate for your organization. From a scenarios perspective, each organization has a whole new set of business processes, once again, different culture and different ways of doing things. So start with identifying the problem and then look at the products to see how the products will enhance the process that will then solve the problem. And when you're looking at the process, it's also really important to look at, well, what are the people's behaviors that will help us either be more effective or behaviors that are attention distracting, right? And we'll talk about attention distracting just a little bit more in a second. The fourth stage of adoption is what we call as proficiency, right? And really, that's our aspirational state. And proficiency is all about making sure that we're using more and more of the product suite to get even more value from the investment. And so the adoption program is not just a one-off program, right? And that's why I really like these user groups, because on a regular basis, you get to be kept up to date with the changes. And this gives you all an opportunity to continuously reflect on what else you can do to further create value for employees within your organizations or with your customers. So if you think about from a formula perspective, this is the formula that I always like to use when I'm talking about how do I create that change. I need to ensure that people understand why that change is happening. They need to have decided to want to participate in the change, which means you need to present a very convincing reason for why the change is good and what's in it for them. They need to understand how they're going to participate in the change. And when they're able to, and when they see the value of it, they're going to continue to participate in the change, right? So this is sort of my quick cheat sheet on what is adoption and how I actually talk about value creation. Now, within that context, right, we've been developing MOCA, or the Modern Collaboration Architecture, for a number of years. When we were working with organizations to help them identify the right behaviors for their people, a lot of organizations said, well, what's the definition of right? Right? What would you consider a good behavior versus a bad behavior? And that's a really difficult question to answer, because now we are getting into the philosophy of good and bad for an organization. And if the culture of an organization is looking at good elements or bad elements, and especially where we are in Australia and the part of the world we belong to, even though we are a Western country, we are surrounded by Asia, right, which is a whole bunch of Eastern philosophies from a cultural perspective. So having a individual-centric culture versus the collectivist cultures that surround us, there is that cross-pollination creates a very different set of expectations on what's good versus bad. So the position that we talk is that any behavior that helps to harness the attention of an individual is a good behavior, because it helps them become more effective in their role. And any behavior that distracts the attention of an individual is, for all intents and purposes, an attention distracting behavior. And so we want to minimize those type of behaviors during an M365 adoption program. So MOCA really helps to clarify what outcome are we trying to achieve, right? To help to guide what are good behaviors and what are attention distracting behaviors. It gives you the opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge of how everything fits together in M365, because M365 is a big suite and it's constantly growing. And not only that, it sets you up for success as you move from product deployment to product adoption. And it helps you elevate the conversation from just IT stakeholders to the business stakeholders. And that's why MOCA has been such an important part of Microsoft's positioning of M365 adoption initiatives. So we've now been spending a lot more time talking about people as the center of our adoption program. It's all about helping that individual find balance, right? And especially over the last 2 years, in the world of COVID-19, I know I've had to think about how I balance my work life, friends very differently to the way I've had to before. And so now I'm going to move through parts of this presentation quite quickly, because a lot of you have already seen this content, and I'll point you to where you can go and revisit this content as well. But really, the M365 adoption conversation is really starting from how do organizations help individuals become even more effective as an individual contributor to the organization. It's about how they apply their skills and their experience and that growth mindset to their everyday work. And we know that the individuals have a whole range of needs. And we know that we need to be able to support the individuals in fulfilling these needs or these capabilities. And so we came up with what apps within the M365 suite actually help deliver these outcomes. And we have done a mapping based on how these apps will help harness the attention of the individual and minimize any attention distraction that may be caused by using the wrong app for the wrong job. So as you can see, right, OneDrive is still the place where I would go and store my files. If I want to look at my well-being, I want to go to Viva, right? And Viva Insights is going to help me think about how much time I'm spending on activities at work and after hours as well, so I can reflect. If I want to participate in meetings, right, I know that Teams is still the place. And for IM conversations, once again, going back to Teams is where I'm going to get the most value. Measuring my performance. I know at Microsoft, all our KPIs and individual performance dashboards are built in Power BI. So I can very easily see where I stand. And so using these technologies to help me reflect on what is the right enabling capability for me as an individual is really important. Also, my learning now becomes a really important part because I'm responsible for my learning. And so making sure that I'm making time aside in my week so I can continuously learn new things is really important. Viva now helps to block time in your calendar every week for you to spend on your learning. And for me, those 2 hours on the Friday are really precious, and I will not compromise them for any meeting with anyone. So those 2 hours I spend to ensure that I'm focusing on my learning every single week. Outlook is still a really important part of the way we engage. I use Outlook to look at my instructions, right, that come through email, look at my to-do list so I know exactly what are things that I need to be able to achieve and allocate time in my calendar to get my work done. And so Teams has not made email obsolete. Teams is a very important complementing tool to Outlook, which is still a really important part of how I organize my time. Now, individuals are great, but a lot of us deliver outcomes as part of a greater team. And so we've put a definition for a team. So a team is defined as a group of individuals with interdependent activities that work together towards a common goal or a common outcome. Now, there are two key aspects that I want you to all look at when you're thinking about a team. A team is not necessarily just a random group of people that report to a manager, or even a group of people that report to a manager. There are two key attributes that every team must have. Number one is interdependency in the activities. Even if you report to different managers, as long as you're all working together and you have interdependency on your work, that's a part of you meeting the definition of a team. And especially if you're delivering towards a common outcome, you are definitely a team. I come across, say, salespeople, and especially when you're direct sales, even though you may be reporting to the same manager, you, instead of collaborating with each other, you may actually be competing with each other. And so by default, that doesn't make you a team. You could have a group of people that report to the same manager that have a need to collaborate, and you're all working towards a common outcome. And in that case, yes, definitely you are a team, right? So when you think about teams, and this is something that I want you to all keep in mind when you're creating a team in Microsoft Teams, is the group of people, are they actually behaving like a team? And then that's the point that I use to sort of check if the team's environment has been set up correctly or not. In order for teams to be successful, right, they need clear outcomes, they need a leader, processes, skills, roles and responsibilities, and then a whole range of capabilities. And once again, we have mapped the apps that will help harness the attention of the user as they go about delivering against these needs and these capabilities. Team well-being is a really important part, and very often organizations have not really focused on it as much as potentially we have the opportunity to do going forward, especially as people work in the hybrid work scenario. And so once again, Viva Insights is a really critical part to pause and really think about how is it that my team is doing, right, as a team leader. Microsoft Teams is the hub of teamwork. And so every time we want to bring a group of people together to deliver against that outcome, right, use Teams as your platform to do that. We do need to constantly learn and grow, and the 70-20-10 readiness framework helps us with that. And what the framework talks about is that 70% of all our readiness comes from on-the-job learning. 20% comes from formal mentoring or coaching, and 10% comes from courses that you would attend. And so if you think about it, right, nearly 90% of your learning outside of that 10% that you're getting from formal courses is somewhere on the job and talking to people. And so the wider your network of people that you can leverage, the more your learning opportunities. And so this is where communities play a really critical role within an organization. And so a community is a group of individuals that have a common interest. And so if you think about the way communities are typically organized around that common interest, they typically have a facilitator, right? So for example, this community is all around M365 adoption. You have a clear facilitator. So Kirsty comes in every month and facilitates these conversations. Communities are a great place for innovation. It's about getting people from different backgrounds together, clashing ideas. And that's when you create something new and something beautiful. And the membership of a community is quite fluid. So you may decide that you want to be a part of this community today, and next year your job changes and you decide to join a different community. Communities have a whole range of needs and capabilities as well. And as you can see, Yammer is really featured around helping communities grow and harness knowledge. Yammer is a really critical part of how an organization connects its people. And having communities that work together, Yammer is designed exactly for that purpose. Now, previously, we had always thought about communities as a standalone concept. But I guess the more we work with communities, and it's really great to see Lawrence on this call as well from Swoop Analytics, right? And Lawrence and the team have done enormous amounts of research around making sure that communities have an enormous amount of focus within organizations. Each community typically has its own culture. And if you look at an organization's culture, it's typically created as a collection of the culture created by the communities that are within that organization. So we are increasingly seeing communities as subset of that wider organization. And the organization's overall culture is significantly driven by the culture established within the communities. And so organizational capabilities like managing knowledge and expertise and publishing videos and corporate comms and news and enterprise data stores, right? These are really core capabilities that are very heavily leveraged by your communities. And so making sure that Yammer is positioned as the tool that helps bring communities together to help individuals constantly learn and grow so they can become even more effective versions of themselves is really critical part of the OVA M365 adoption program. Communities and teams sort of work together. So we're a team. In a team, your membership is mandatory because you have a role to play. You have a set of skills that the outcome relies on. Within a community, your membership is optional because you can pick and choose where you want to get the biggest bang for your buck and where you want to invest your learning. In a team, a recommended team size is between 5 to 12 for high performing teams. And that's based on the research done by the University of Pennsylvania, where they found that the higher the team sizes became, that increased more risk towards the outcomes being achieved due to an increased set of interdependencies. Right? So you can have larger teams. It's just your team leader needs to spend more time managing risk. Whereas in a community, the larger the community, the better. The more perspectives you have access to, the more opportunities you have to cross-pollinate ideas. The focus of a team is on the delivery of an outcome, whereas the community is focused on learning, innovating, capturing that organizational experience, and keeping your employees engaged, especially as employees are increasingly working from locations other than the office. So Yammer and teams are really a together option. I sometimes find that organizations are creating communities in teams, right? And I would get organizations to rethink that approach. And the reason why I don't particularly like that approach is because the notifications areas in Teams treats all notifications the same way. And so if what I don't want is my notifications area drowned by notifications within communities that hide away the critical actions that I need to perform within some of the teams where I need to deliver time-sensitive outcomes. And so that's why Microsoft have Teams to deliver teamwork and Yammer for delivering community outcomes. What I recommend instead is install the Yammer app within Teams. So that way you can keep all your communities in Yammer and leverage Yammer as a platform for community management while using Teams as your platform to access both teamwork as well as the communities. Now, this has been the typical MOCA that we have talked about over the last few years. What we have also now started to sort of delve more into is around business optimization. And we know that this is an area that has become even more top of mind for organizations over the last couple of years. And this is where Dynamics plays a really important role. And so for sales professionals and retail and marketing professionals, we know that they need to do very predictable things every single day. And so instead of using a number of different products, coming into Dynamics and using the business flow capabilities within Dynamics and its integration with M365 just makes work easier. And so this is where organizations want to think about business optimization as an extension of people enablement. And so an adoption program across M365 can then be extended to an adoption program around Dynamics 365. However, where we see the most interest from organizations around the world is around how do we differentiate our business and really harness that competitive edge that we have created. And so having an agile culture is such an important part of that. And so if you look at it from a business differentiation perspective, two organizations, even though they may be from the same industry, would have come up with different ways of doing the same thing. And that different way of doing something is what creates that competitive edge. And now that you have created an optimized business process, how do you use technology to automate as much of that as possible? And this is where organizations have typically used professional developers to create a line of business application, which is specific to implementing a competitive advantage for their organization. And that investment really makes a lot of sense because that helps organizations remove manual effort, create further automation using technology, and as a result, further harness people's attention. However, there is an additional opportunity that's available, and that's around citizen developers, because IT can only create so much automation. Whereas if you go through every single person within the organization and say, can you identify one or two opportunities of how we can do our business better? Right? It's that bottom up improvement that can add up to a significant competitive advantage. And this is where the Power Platform Suite plays a critical role. And I would encourage all of you to think about how Power Platforms are used within your organization or within your customers, and how you've got the right governance structure in place so every single business user can look at the way they do work so they can streamline their processes by themselves without IT needing to be involved in every single initiative. What you'll see as part of, say, the SharePoint store and the Teams stores is that our partners are creating even more targeted solutions for organizations to use as a competitive edge. And so I would encourage you to all look at both the professional developers, which is the in-house app dev, the citizen developers, which is commoditizing development, but also look at leveraging the right partner solutions, especially when it helps you create a competitive edge. And so it's usually a combination of all these fields that are helping to create even more effective people across the organization. And so the top three focus areas are what we call as enabling focus areas. These are all around enabling people. And the bottom two focus areas are what we call as the business focus areas. And they're the ones that are focusing on the business process and the business optimization components. M365 plays a critical role in helping people become more effective, either as individuals or as part of a team or within a community and the wider organization. And then in addition, if we empower them by the right business optimization and the right business differentiation culture, that's where we find that people do their best work. And so when you're thinking about an M365 adoption program, I would encourage you to look at a more holistic perspective and look at how do we make not just people effective, but also the business processes more effective. And then at the end of the day, the question is, well, why are we doing all this? What is the value? And to me, it all comes down to our people. It is all about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And so from a person perspective, what we typically find is that people have a professional identity, and organizations that help harness the individual's professional identity are definitely seen, according to research, as preferred employers. So from a professional identity perspective, people typically have a role that they feel that they belong to. So either as a sales professional, as a health professional, as an education professional, as an adoption and change management professional. And within that context, right, technology can help them create the right brands. So internally, they can use Yammer and Delve to propagate their brand. And LinkedIn is a very powerful tool to help create an external brand outside of the organization, out in the industry. Every person also has a technical identity. And so as part of that technical identity, we want to make sure that they have the right technical enablement and the right security, compliance, and governance structures around them. But in addition, from an adoption program perspective, we want to teach people behaviors that are secure, that are compliant to the organization's policies. And so as you think about creating optimized business processes, think about if your behaviors that you're recommending are also secure behaviors and are compliant to the organizational policies. And then the third part is the personal identity. So I know the persona that I am at work is very different to the persona that I am when I'm with my friends and with my family. And so I need to think about, well, what is the purpose for which I work? And what is my growth look like? And what's my empowerment? And what's my well-being? How do I keep that work-life balance? How do I take advantage of the work-life integration while keeping that work-life separation in place? And so there are a number of things that now, especially within the hybrid workplace, I'm having to think about that I maybe wasn't focusing on as much in the future. And Viva plays a really important in that employee enablement part, right? And once again, this is all about helping to harness that individual's personal identity, either that of a parent, of a friend, or as a singer or a musician, right? Whatever is it that individual identifies themselves to be. And really, people are the center of the modern collaboration architecture that we have sort of created. Now, I'm just mindful of time. So last couple of slides. So the question is, well, so what? What if we look at MOCA and we put the MOCA framework in the organizations, right? Either within our organization or within our customers' organization. What is the advantage of that? And because MOCA has been designed to help harness attention within our employees, right, and help to look at what are considered attention harnessing behaviors versus attention distracting behaviors, what we are finding that this will have a direct impact on the culture of the organization. So if an organization enables the person to be an effective individual contributor within the organization by giving them the positive resources such as hope and helping to build self-efficacy, in return, the person will provide the organization their commitment, their thought leadership, and positive deviance. And so if people who are not familiar, positive deviance are initiatives that people will do out of their own back to help drive a positive outcome within the organization, even though they maybe haven't been asked to do that, right? Because they believe so passionately about the outcome and their individual contribution that they will go above and beyond what's been asked of them. If a team enables the person by providing them the psychological safety, a sense of achievement, a sense of belonging, right? And you would have noticed that Microsoft is talking about a sense of belonging a lot more. And we have partnered with TEDx Sydney, and we have a number of TEDx sessions that presenters around the world are contributing to around a sense of belonging. It's because it's a really important part of the way we use autonomy and trust. In return, the person will provide their creativity. They will take a sense of accountability, provide their energy and performance to the team outcomes. Whereas from an organizational perspective, if they provide a sense of meaning, an organization provides the opportunity for an individual to learn and become a master, provide a sense of connection, care, and support. In return, the person will provide their most precious commodities, which is their attention, their time, and organizational citizenship behavior. And so that's the power of implementing the modern collaboration architecture within an organization. And the M365 set of tools are the enablers for that business transformation. And so I guess as next steps, maybe go and have a look at some of the MOCA content that we have published, including the extended MOCA version. And that is available at aka.ms/MOCA. You'll see a number of videos. You'll see a version of MOCA as it used to be, which we call as MOCA Standard, and the new extended version that are presented today. Talk to your customers and within your organizations, not just about MOCA, but also talk about what is adoption. Because maybe you'll find that not everybody's on the same page around what adoption means. And you want to make sure that they're talking about that behavior change instead of just the technology enablement. And by the way, if you have any ideas on how we can make MOCA better, please reach out to Ross and I, and we would love to hear from you and get your perspectives. And with that, that's all I have. Any questions?
Haven't seen any come through, but please feel free to put them on now if anyone has some questions they'd like to ask. Raise your hand, come off mute if you like.
All right, I don't bite.
Hey, Kirsty, just a question from me.
Yes, hi Phil.
I joined the last 20 minutes, and just the 20 minutes was super valuable. When will the recording and transcription be available? Because I'd like to start at the beginning.
Sure. So I generally will download it and put it back on. It'll usually be up before the end of the day. I'll push it out across Twitter, LinkedIn, in the meetup group as well. And you've also got the link. I've put it into chat. So it's the bit.ly link that I've already put into chat. The presentation and everything will all get dropped in there. Rishi's presentation, it's the extended version that you'll actually find on the MOCA website. It's there already. It hasn't got that adoption component bit at the beginning. So what I'll do is I might get him to send it through and I'll drop it in. I generally put the presentation link in for you all inside my own presentation. So that'll all be in there. And I do really appreciate it, Rishi. Trying to untangle it for people and get their head around it is really important. And of course, with you guys being the author of this, explaining it really helps. It looks like we've got a couple of questions maybe coming through. Glynis.
Hi, Rishi, I connected recently and Kirsty with you, and I must say that being able to contextualize the Microsoft 365 offering within MOCA has been transformational for me anyway, because I've been playing around and just, in isolation. But I think once I came across MOCA and I went, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's now given me a structure that I can use to try and drive adoption. So I think it's actually really quite impressive. So,
yeah. Oh, thank you.
Just wanted to say thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. Cameron.
No worries.
Yeah, I was just curious as to where do you see MOCA fitting in smaller organisations as far as the number of employees go? When do you see MOCA really coming into effect? Is it 5, 10, 15 employees, 25? What's the business size that you sort of think that will start at?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cameron. So typically I've seen organizations as small as 2,000, maybe even, actually, I'd say even 1,000 employees can very successfully look at MOCA Standard as a template for looking at their adoption rollout. MOCA Standard focuses on just 4 focus areas, so individual, team, community, and organization. And we have added the person at the center of it. So, I mean, it's more about the culture of the organization and not the size as much. What we have been getting more and more feedback on as well is, can you create a MOCA Lite? So something that is for much smaller organizations. And that's something that Ross and I, with the rest of the MOCA team, are exploring at the moment to see if that makes sense. And if it does, then what would look like. What you could start off with is MOCA Standard. And what we've seen that to be quite universally applicable. And for larger organizations that are looking at dynamics and other business optimization components, that the MOCA Extended makes sense there. But yeah, Cameron, I would actually love your feedback on how
Yeah,
your
sure.
experience of MOCA standard goes.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I've had quite a bit of experience in helping smaller organisations go through this process, typically under 1,000. It certainly presents its own unique challenges that brings to the table, I guess. So I'd be really keen on any sort of help and feedback as far as that goes.
Yeah, sure, mate. We're very happy to connect with you on LinkedIn and see how we can exchange ideas.
Lovely, great, perfect, thank you.
Phil, you've got another question?
Yeah, Rishi, how much time do you spend talking to the internal Microsoft sales teams about this stuff? Because it seems like this the I'm not sure I articulate this myself. They need to start leading with more of this stuff, which drives a lot of the rest of the other businesses, and it just seems that they don't necessarily understand adoption at all. That's maybe a bit harsh, but you get the sentiment, right?
I get the sentiment, Philip. And once again, Microsoft as an organization is going through our own change, right? And for us, moving away from from Office as Office 10, Office 13, an app that's installed on the desktop, to this being a transformational opportunity in the business in the cloud is a huge shift in the way we need to look at the cloud as well. The other unique challenge we have is we are 160,000 person organization. And so when you have an organization that big, change happens slowly. Philip, but I definitely take your point. And so I guess what I would encourage you to do is to challenge the account teams and the sales teams. Every time you hear from them, is push back and say, well, what about MOCA? And can you talk us through the business perspective of how the change is going to land? Does that help, Philip?
Yeah, it does. You've answered the question. I've got a lot of work to do.
Look, there's always some challenges, and people are coming and going all the time too. So re-educating, re-educating. Same in adoption space on even the technology and what we do around adoption, and it's a never-ending journey, I suppose, isn't it? It's like all things. So just to, if there's no other questions, or if there is, please feel free to drop them into chat. I'm going to finalise. I haven't taken out some of the information that I put in from last month for you. I've put it into the where do I find around the adoption support for Twitter with Caruana, being able to follow there, and some of the learning pathways, the book of news from Ignite, what was actually going on there. So I've dropped all that back in again in terms of swag. The November champs call has gone live. It was back in November. I did put the date. The new one that'll be coming up won't be till next year now on January 25th. Don't know the topics yet for it, but it will actually come out. So if you want to join the champs call, that's when it will be. For anyone that wants to jump on, you can join the champs program. Don't forget, you've got lots of other collection and information available for you that is there. I've dropped in the MOCA link in terms of the adoption resources for you, and where you can actually find sort of further information and other user groups to support you, including the Sydney UC group, if you want to dive into that a little bit more. I have been putting in only recently the past presentations in case you didn't miss it. So the links are all available inside the presentation if you want to go back. In terms of what's next, we will be meeting in the new year. I always leave January free because we can't really do it the first Tuesday of the month without everyone everyone still being on holidays. But in February will be the 1st of Feb, and the Microsoft Reactor here in Sydney is going to be open again. We are fully booked back in for next year to be able to start kicking off in person. It will be hybrid for those also in Melbourne to be able to join in. So generally we try to do it the first Tuesday of the month. Sometimes it might even be the first Friday of the month, which is what we would often used to do down in Melbourne. So it will be one or the other as a rule, but we will try and make sure we kick off on the Tuesday. No, but apart from that, if there are any thoughts or questions or comments that you, if you want to, connect at all, then at any point you can always reach out. I am on Twitter and LinkedIn. Otherwise, until next time, stay safe. Don't try to have a fun Christmas. Try not to burn the house down with the Christmas lights. And I really look forward to seeing you all again in the new year. Thank you for joining and being such wonderful support of the user group this year. If you've been here, it's been now a couple of years. So thanks, everyone. And look forward to the new year and seeing lots of great smiley faces.
Nice wrap there, Kirsty, with vacation. Well done.
You've got to love a good lampoon's Christmas vacation. Make sure the dog's not yakking on a bone under the table and we're not lighting the Christmas tree on fire with the cat. Have a wonderful time, anyone. If anyone wants to stay around and chat or ask questions, please feel free to stay. I can always turn off the recording and if there's anything that's going on, more than happy to support you. If not,
Thank you.
Well, see you all. Thank you so much, Rishi, for presenting today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kirsty.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.
I'll stop the recording.
Bye-bye.